Okay, my name is Gordon Jackson, and I was invited here by Ron and Steve and Al to present to you my testimony and just what the whole change in life has meant to me. I'm happy to be here with you. In fact, at this age, I'm kind of happy to be anyplace. But I'm a true prune picker in that I was born in Bakersfield, California, and I spent most of my life in California. I actually grew up in the city of Los Angeles. Went to school there, high school, and it was in high school in my senior year that I met my wife, Wilma, who I lost just last month, and we'd been married for 72 years. So it was quite a blow. But anyway, after high school, the World War II had broken out, and I was interested in the aviation. But at that time, before they'd accept you as an aviation cadet in any of the services, required a college education and diploma. Of course, I did not have it. When I got out of high school, I went to work in the oil fields around Lameda and Torrance, and learned just a whole lot of life's lessons there. And when I left that job, I went to work for Columbia Construction in building the breakwater out of Long Beach. We used to take a water taxi out of Belmont Shore and go out to what they call the mound, because some of you may know and some not. When they build a breakwater, the first thing they put down is they build up to a certain height with mud and sand, and then they start to put the rock on. Well, I worked on a mud scow that they'd haul out from the Inner Harbor, Long Beach. And there we worked 7 days a week and changed shifts every week. One week we'd work daytimes, the next swing shift, the next graveyard. So it was quite an experience for a young guy of 18 years old. And shortly after that, they changed the requirements in aviation, and you no longer required a college education. So I enlisted immediately and was accepted as a naval aviation cadet in Los Angeles. First part of the training we went through was what they call the civilian pilot training in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And that was quite a deal in those days. In those days, and this was 1943, the town of Las Cruces consisted of about a block and a half downtown, and that was it. In fact, my flight instructor was the only mortuary in town. He was the #1 guy in the mortuary. So we got some flying time in, and I think the Navy Services used that as kind of a weeding out program, because we started out with around 20 people from the LA area, and by the time we got through CBMC, for one reason or another, they had washed out about 8 to 9 of the guys, for either they just couldn't hack it or they got airsick. There were all kinds of reasons. But the next stop for us in training was the Navy pre-flight school. The pre-flight school for me was Del Monte, California. Oh. And I, again, was fortunate in that Del Monte was really considered the country clubs of the pre-flight schools. Because we had individual rooms, 4 guys to a room, our own private bath. And unlike all the other pre-flights, were more of a barrack-style existence. But there in pre-flight, our work days were divided in half. Half of the day was devoted to military type of training with hikes and all kinds of physical activity, and the other half was a ground school instruction of all kinds, both in aviation and the naval justice system and the whole ball of wax. I was really happy there because I was a kind of a jock in those days. And you had your selection and you were going to be there 3 months, but each month you could pick a primary sport. Well, I picked football and then boxing and then wrestling. So I was really happy in those cadet days. We went from there to a primary flight school in Hutchinson, Kansas. And in Hutchinson we flew what they called the Yellow Perils, which was a biplane prop job. There again, they weeded out several people. For one, we'd have a check flight every so often. And again, I was kind of fortunate because one of the primary check pilots was my instructor. And he had a reputation of down-checking people. Well, I didn't have to contend with that because he was my instructor. What he would do, the Yellow Peril had 2 cockpits. One, the student was in, and in the rear cockpit, the instructor was in. And when I do something that displeased him, he'd take the stick and just shake it back and forth. And I had a lot of sore knees in those days. He was a good instructor, and he got me through the primary flight training. From there we went to Pensacola, Florida, and had some experience in night flying and instrument flying, and then to advanced training with the SNJ, which at that time was one of the most modern aircraft and the most powerful that I had flown. So that was, again, a wonderful experience for a young man. I graduated and got my wings and commission in 1944, April of 44. And on that particular day, my wife Wilma and I were married. And in those days, you were not considered an adult until you turned 21. So I had to get my parents' permission to get married because I was only 20 years of age. From that time, we were offered a chance to apply for the Marine Corps for those who were interested, which I was. So we went the usual routine with various tests and before an interview board, and I was fortunate enough, in my opinion, to be selected for the Marine Corps. So when I graduated in 44, I received my wings and also became a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. From there, they sent us down to Jacksonville, Florida. And there I was introduced to the Corsair. I was being into fighters all the time. That was quite an experience. The Corsair, if none of you are familiar with it, it was what we call the bent wing fighter plane, a single engine, 2,800 horses, which was really powerful. Well, I really took to that airplane. Fortunately, it's hard to explain. You just become a part of it after a while. Some do and some don't. I was lucky enough to really feel a part of that Corsair from the very first flight. I came across my reading here recently where a quote from John Glenn. John was a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps and did his overseas duty in the Marshall Islands. And they asked him, he had a Marine Corps Aviation Association club back in Patuxent, Maryland. So they had asked John what it was like to fly the Corsair. And I hadn't been asked that question many times, but of course his answer was a lot more eloquent than mine most of the time. So I wrote it down and I brought it with me because I wanted to just tell you, to convey the feeling somewhat of flying a plane like the Corsair. Well, John had said, there's nothing more pleasant than flying the Corsair. At the controls of a small aircraft with a high performance is quite a thrill and quite a treat. And to be able to fly that day in and day out was really like a dream come true. You reach such a point of oneness with the plane. Some people would call that the Zen of flying, but he said that's a little too deep for me. So, right here, flying, but excuse me, my vision's not what it used to be. You just feel a part of the plane and not separate at all. And I guess that you would describe it as you are the brains and the plane is the body. Well, that pretty much says it all as an explanation of at that time, at that age, what it meant, how it felt to fly a high-performance aircraft. You really become a part of the airplane, thankfully. And of course, at that age, nothing really bothers you. You never consider about anything happening to you because you feel invulnerable, which some of us did, and unfortunately, some did not. Well, I served in the Marine Corps for 22 years, and I was fortunate enough to have some good duty stations and to command 2 squadrons. The last squadron I had was fighters, F-8U Crusader in Kaneohe, Hawaii, which was really tough duty. Had a place on the base and they had a golf course, and I loved to play golf all the time. So it was really a great way to wind up my career. But I did retire from the Marine Corps in 1965, and I had stuck around at the house there in Tustin, California, and the wife and I decided that's where we wanted to stay. So we had a builder come in and rebuild, add on to the house, and that's been our home ever since. I was sitting at breakfast one morning, and my habit was reading the want ads, and this was about 2 or 3 months after I had retired. And I saw that they were advertising a position in the city of Norwalk, but it called for a degree in civil engineering, which of course I didn't have. But I thought, well, I'll go up there just for the experience of going before an interview board, because of course I'd never had a civilian job, I'd never been interviewed. So I went to Norwalk, went through the interview board, and after the board, they contacted me a couple of days later and told me I had the job. So I became the assistant to the director of public works, and I remained with the city of Norwalk for about 21 years. And ultimately, I became one of the department heads as the director of transportation. So it was a wonderful experience, you know, completely different from the Marine Corps, as you're dealing, of course, with council members. I spent a lot of time up around Sacramento pursuing funding for our young transit system. But we finally did establish a transit system, one of the first ones in the southeast Los Angeles area, and it has been very successful. And during that time, in my career in the Marine Corps and also after I retired, I played a lot of golf and thoroughly enjoyed it. So after retiring, I continued to play, and the wife and I did some traveling with the motorhome. So one afternoon after I played golf at El Toro, I was not too happy with my short game. So I thought, well, I'll go to this small little course in Santa Ana, Riverview, you know, and just to kind of work on my short golf game. Well, it was there in Santa Ana, Riverview, that I met a gentleman by the name of Lauren Grissett. Well, as some of you know Lauren. He is what they refer to often as Mr. CBMC in Orange County. and his wife were very instructive in creating the first CBMC, I think, in Santa Ana. And also Lauren at one time served as mayor of Santa Ana. But he was really my mentor, and it meant so much to me. After we played golf together, of course he was talking a lot while we were playing, but he invited me to attend a CBMC meeting in Santa Ana, which I agreed to do, and I did. I was there, I met a number of dedicated gentlemen, Steve Garrison, Al Enderle, Ron, and they had almost an immediate impact on me just from their demeanor and their approach to life and all their beliefs. Lauren took me around Santa Ana and invited me to various places where almost every place I heard someone give their testimony. And almost without fail, the testimony ended up as the non-believer becoming a believer and how their life had changed because of that fact. And I was impressed, and I started to attend the weekly meetings of CBMC, and then at one time Steve invited me to sit at his table at a government leaders prayer breakfast that CBMC was sponsoring annually. Well, I did, and there I heard a gentleman give his testimony who was a United States Senator and a very successful businessman, and that he had established several radio stations around Denver, Colorado. But the testimony he gave really struck home to me and impressed me. So from that, and say the association with the wonderful people, and what I heard with all these testimonies began to impact me. I struck up a friendship with a pastor in a small church in Tustin by the name of Rick Bradford. And Rick and I would meet weekly and go through the Bible, and one of the books we studied chapter by chapter was Rick Warren's initial book, you know, the pastor at the large church there at Saddleback. And it's the purpose-driven life. So we went through that by chapter every week. And one time I was doing a lot of reading of the Bible, and I still remember exactly where I was, upstairs in my bedroom, reading. And I really felt something happening to me. Right then I really became a believer. I had been a long time thinking about this, studying about this, and I would not want to commit myself until I was actually positive that I was being accurate and truthful to myself. So at this time I was. So when I gave my testimony before our group in Santa Ana, and I can tell you at that time I really became a different type of person. You know, the Bible says that the fruits of the Spirit are love, peace, joy, self-control, understanding, forgiving. Well, I was starting to experience all of those as a true believer, and once I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, things were not the same. My attitude and my approach to situations was totally different than it had been before, and I was a lot happier person. Well, I remained a member of CBMC for about 21 years, and during that time I served as the chairman of our golf committee. We had a golf tournament once a year, and we'd invite various people around Orange County. And what we tried to do, ideally, it would be match up in a foursome, 2 believers and 2 non-believers. Well, sometimes we were successful and sometimes it didn't work out that way. But all in all, I think we had a good impact and got the message across. Every time we had a golf tournament, we'd have a guest speaker who would present his testimony after we had dinner. These were notable people from the sports world, the entertainment world, and what have you. But they all had a message, and it all was given to the people in attendance there. And I'm rather proud to say that during that 10-year period, we raised about $300,000 for the ministry, and had just a large impact on a number of people and their beliefs through their attendance at the course and their association with believers all the time. You know, it takes, what, 4.5 hours generally to play a round of golf, so they were with believers for all of that time. They all got an earful, and I feel that we had got God's message across to them very effectively. But after I stayed, I left retiree for the Marine Corps because my vision was starting to go, and I didn't hear well, and I still don't. So I thought, well, I just can't be that effective anymore. I have been, and I've just been concentrating on my family, which has turned out to be a large family now. I have 8 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. So we do have a good-sized family. Once I retired, again, I played a lot of golf. I did a lot of traveling around. But my reputation at CBMC was that I was quite unique, and that when I became a believer and accepted Jesus Christ into my life, I was 72 years old. So I was considered kind of the poster boy of CBMC at that time. And that's one of the reasons I was invited here to talk to you this morning. So I was very, very pleased to do that. Once I became a believer and dedicated myself without question to the Lord, life became so much fuller that it's difficult to just explain to you how much it was. Those of you that have gone through that process, I think, will have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Those of you that are still kind of on the fence of whether you're a believer or not, it's never too late, as indicated by my age when I became a believer. So that's really the sum and substance of the message I wanted to get across this morning. And I say, God bless CBMC for everything they've done.